Hey, it's Fun Chief again. Welcome to another installment of the Alliance Match Training Series where fortune favors the prepared mind. Next up is number two in a series of three for spreadsheets, and this particular one is going to focus on resources. So, in the previous lesson, lesson number 9, I talked about the calculations necessary to understand what your expenses are going to be. So, those are expressed in three areas. The first area being your infrastructure requirements to build your build plan. Then you need your research requirements to build your build plan, and then of course the unit requirements to build your build plan. All of that equals what your total costs are going to be, and you want to do it day by day because if you try to sequence in anything other than that, it's going to be a problem. So now this is talking about the other side of the spectrum, like what is your production rates going to look like? So it looks something like this, and again, I know it's a little bit of an eyesore, but I'm really just trying to show you this so you get an idea of what you need to do to build your own. When you first start playing, when you first start off, before you're actually the game actually starts, you're going to get your total resource counts, what you're starting with, but your rates of production are not going to start until the game actually starts. So these will start off as zero, and I think I said that in a previous lesson. But this is showing what it would look like after the start. You know what my total resource counts are going to be. I've obviously spent some, and then what my rates of production are going to be, and that's going to be influenced by things like the number of cities you have. Well, everybody kind of starts out with the same number in these things. Your morale, which should be at 70%, the starting point for everything. But also population, which does vary a little bit from one city to the next. And then finally, the last thing is there is a random aspect to this because you're going to have provinces that are going to populate with, some of them will populate with some resources in them, and that's going to give you a slight variance. So you can't really predict what it's going to be like until you actually get into the game and see what provinces you get with what resources and so on. But you can usually get an estimate before the game starts to have a rough idea. But it could be significantly different, like 20% sometimes. So it can be a lot. I'll point out that the other thing we track is what do you have in your market? Because if you have a build plan that's going to be a little bit short, maybe the market can make up the difference. And so knowing what that is across all of your organization, all of your 7 players is going to be really important. And so you map all that out, what your starting is, what your starting rates are, um, uh, what your market looks like for each of your um, countries, each of your players, and all of that can then be plugged into a spreadsheet and you can kind of track it, right? So your hourly production is going to change from one day to the next, and so usually I try to do this twice a day, whatever it or initially what is it, and then 12 hours later or thereabouts, I'll update it with the most recent information, and that'll give you a pretty good idea in your day to day. So if you track every single country, what their hourly production rate is going to be, you tally all that up and multiply it by 12. Excuse me, multiply that by 24. That will give you what your total um, production rate is across the entire team. And you need to really be thinking about this in terms of team, because if you're not sharing resources, you're probably not going to have a very successful alliance match. It's imperative that you share resources, um, and you might even want to consider having a mule, what we call somebody who doesn't build anything at all. They just basically are there to provide resources to everybody else, so they can have more units that are more highly researched. And that's really it in a nutshell. Just track what your daily changes are. These things are going to be influenced as the day goes on, as the match goes on. You're going to build infrastructure, things like industry, level one, two, three. Usually you can get up to that high. Very rare I've ever seen anything more than that, just because you don't have enough time and resources to build higher than that. But as you build those, they really do make a huge difference in the total amount of materials that you're making. And then, of course, on your provinces, you're talking about local industries. And usually the ones that are the most short are going to be early on. Fuel is going to be a problem and electronics is going to be a problem. As you're doing more and more research, your rares might become a problem. And then when you start doing builds, you're going to start having problems with supplies and so on. So knowing, what your challenges are going to be up front, and knowing where you need to maybe cut back on some of the things that you wanted to build. That's the whole idea about having these spreadsheets. So anyhow, that's it for calculating out what your daily production rates are looking like. And that concludes lesson number 10. Up next is lesson number 11, the third and final installment on spreadsheets. And that's bringing it all together so you can kind of understand what's going on. Do you have a viable build? And giving you a way of being able to make adjustments in the middle of your game to see, hey, based on what I'm seeing with what the enemy is doing, I want to react in a certain way, either build more SAMs or less SAMs because there's no air threat, or whatever it is that you're seeing that you want to change your build plan mid-game. Spreadsheets will allow you to be able to do that, and then this last lesson is kind of a way that you bring all this together. So with that, Fun Chief out, and I'll see you on lesson number 11 here, Spreadsheets, bringing it all together here in just a moment.